This is the Ops Game Changers podcast, where we share real-life stories from remarkable leaders that are transforming the world of service operations in financial services, healthcare, and BPOs. In this series, we explore some of the key challenges faced by service operations as they strive to deliver more capacity, more productivity, and more business impact. In each episode, we delve into how these Ops Game Changers have addressed a key challenge or issue. Our guests share how they went about unlocking significant value, adopting best practices, and experiencing some game-changing results.
Hello and welcome to Ops Game Changers, the podcast that shines a light on the crucial role that operations team have in driving business performance and improving staff and customers' experience. My name is Bhavesh and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at ActiveOps. And in each episode, I hone in on one KPI or a challenge that a business has solved. We delve into how they've gone about doing this and we explore the outcomes achieved. Now, today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to delve into the world of sport. Now, sport for a long time has been at the forefront of using data to drive athlete performance. So the question we're going to ask ourselves in today's podcast is how we in operations can learn from sport. Now, in order to explore this in a little bit more detail, I'm delighted to welcome our guest today. It's Ciaran Beattie. Now, Ciaran's the Director of Rugby at the Great Britain Rugby Sevens. An ex-player himself, I know Ciaran is passionate about how to use data to drive performance on and off the pitch. Now, before we jump into topic, let's kind of welcome Ciaran to the podcast. So, Ciaran, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, listen, before we jump into data and your journey with data, you're an ex-player, right? So, how did that passion start? Tell us your story of how you ended up where you are, from a point of view when you first started to play rugby to now being where you are in your role as Director of Rugby.
Oh, I don't know how long the podcast is, but I'll try and give the amended version. I think I fell in love with rugby and probably rugby sevens when I was in the womb, to be honest. It was just growing up here in the beautiful Scottish borders. Sevens is a bit of a way of life down here. It's the birthplace of it, and rugby is definitely in the blood. So growing up in and amongst rugby constantly. My mum was a physio at the local club. My dad was a S&C coach, and
Wow.
it was just your days were your nights, your days were just spent at the rugby club. So I think I was always going to have some involvement in it, and then just loved it. I think that was the thing. I fell in love with it rather than it wasn't necessarily because I was any good at it. I just really enjoyed the sport, and then over time probably grew and had some really fortunate to have some good people in and around me and good family and friends, and then came to be a professional rugby player, and then I got cut fairly short due to injury, and I actually fell into performance analysis, funnily enough.
Oh, wow.
And then had a career there. Finished with the national team. Was a Scotland team performance analyst. 6 years there, and then went into coaching. And after a few years, I've landed here into Director of Rugby at Great Britain Sevens, which I'm very grateful for. It's a huge challenge, but one I'm absolutely loving.
So it's one of the things I'm always passionate about, and I've seen obviously the sevens play. It's an incredibly fast sport. You have to be incredibly fit, and you take a lot of hits during the tournament or during the games, right? So, what was it like playing? Because it just looks insane.
It was that. I think I have the utmost respect for anyone that steps onto a sevens pitch, because what you're about to put your body through it's hard to describe. You think I've ran marathons, ultra marathons, I've done CrossFit stuff, but it's a different thing playing, because sevens you have the ultimate fatigue level in terms of aerobic, anaerobic. Your body's aching from the physicality of it. Plus you've got to make technically you've got to execute some skills under extreme pressure. And tactically, your brain's got to be thinking all the time, because there's always opportunity, there's always threat. So for me, it's the ultimate sport. I'm very biased, but I think it's the ultimate sport. But it does put you as an individual under the microscope. What was it like? it's nerve-wracking every time. I always say to new players when they come in that they're always nervous before their first caps. And I always describe it as type 2 fun. It's like you'll not enjoy it in the moment, but you will after. The pride you feel walking off of a pitch when you've managed to actually last that 14 minutes, or even better when you've lasted a tournament or a double leg, is the pride in yourself, and the accomplishment is huge. And that's the addiction, I think, why we keep doing it. So
Yeah, I guess so.
it's tough. It's a warrior sport.
Yeah, totally. And for people, our listeners who perhaps don't know sevens, tell us a little bit about the format. What's the sevens all about?
So sevens is kind of what it says. They try and stick to sevens. It's 7-minute halves, 7 players, which when you compare it to a 15s game, there's a lot more space on the pitch, and that means there's lots more going on. So there's tries every 90 seconds. The whole point of the game is to speed it up and to make it really attractive, and to put the players under some real stress, and therefore you see some real opportunities and threats in the game and some amazing things going on. So it's an incredible sport. So 7 minutes each way. We play on the World Series. We'll tend to do, there's different formats for each tournament, but how it tends to work is you'll be in a pool stage, day one, and then day two you'll go to quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals, and you'll get seedings accordingly. And there's a big World Series. We are really fortunate. We travel around the world to the most amazing places, and we go play the sport we love for the year. And then at the end of it, there's a winner and a loser. There's a crowned world champions, and then there's relegation as well. So there's a business end to this as well. It's not just all fun, but it's a beautiful sport, and it's easy to follow. I think one of the things, soccer is one of the most watched and followed sports in the world because it's so easy to watch. You don't need to know the rules. It's pretty easy. You pop the ball, the
Apart from
goal.
the offside rule, right?
Yeah. Well, that therein lies the thing. That's the most difficult law.
Yeah.
That isn't really that difficult.
No,
When you
you're
go
right.
to rugby, oh my goodness, there's lots of laws. There's lots. Whereas a sevens is a simplified version of that. It's the same laws, but it becomes easier to watch. It's easier to follow because there's just less moving parts. So, I, again, very biased. I just think it's a beautiful sport.
No, it's a great sport. It's a great sport. I've started to love it, if I'm honest. The more we've kind of worked with you guys, it's been fantastic. So you mentioned that your career cut short due to injury, and then you went into performance. So I'm curious then, if we kind of talk a little bit about data, what was it like back then? Was data a big part? Talk us through a little bit of that early journey of yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think so that we're talking 2005, 2006,
Mm-hmm.
just 2000, even 2007, as late as that, really. So I had an injury that was, I was out for the season. I was young, I was mad for it, loved the sport, obviously, and was a professional player. So I was sitting on my bum doing nothing really, and said I want to keep my brain active with rugby, especially in rugby. So volunteered to start doing some sort of what is performance analysis. But at the time, it was just literally VHS tape, stick it in, take loads of notes. And I mean, this is professional teams we're talking about. That was where it was at. And then I'd sit down with the coaches and go off of a line out. They run a 6-man line out. They throw up at the front, like really simple, basic things. And it kind of grew arms and legs. I didn't really get back playing because of the injury. I kind
Yeah.
of, for a couple of years, I was still professional and dipping in and out. And then ended up going out of that into performance analysis. And it was the early stages of basic. For the first time, you could put a game on a laptop. You could then code, so block the game up into simple things. There's a scrum, there's a line out, there's a restart. So basic things. Then from that, it started very quickly we were generating some stats on sports ourselves rather than looking at external companies. So as a team, when I was working for Scotland Sevens as an analyst, I could generate my own stats on that team. So that's where it started. Were the stats wholly relevant in influencing the game? questionable, and I still question that now. And I'm sure we'll delve into that. But it's because it was brand new, and it was like, oh, we've got stats on this. It felt shiny, and it felt like it would influence the game. So yeah, that was it. And then 6 years there, and at that time I was in a really fortunate position. I was doing the national team, I was doing age grades, I was doing sevens, I was in with both pro teams, Edinburgh and Glasgow. So I was getting a real touch point in every area, which I think ultimately has helped me as a coach, as a person, and how you want to shape an environment, because you just got exposure to all these amazing places. So it was really cool, a great time.
That's awesome. So it sounds like at that early stages, it was about using data in inverted commas to see how the team performs on the pitch. Does that feel right? And then when did data start coming in for conditioning the player before they cross the line?
Yeah, I mean that I think that was a bit that was probably ahead. So when I was speaking about performance analysis, that's the on pitch rugby stuff, like what was our conversion rate
Yeah.
in the opposition 22, all that kind of stuff. So that started to creep in. The S&C is obviously, that was there. I mean, it comes on leaps and bounds every year, as you're probably aware, and you see it with different types of training. But I mean, it was just at that point there's an early aerobic test, an early strength test. Right, we're going to do a hypertrophy 6-week block, and then we'll test you again in this strength test. That was probably as much as it went. There was simple stuff like urine testing, which there was. I remember doing an aerobic test where you got you run the running machine, you got masks on and stuff. Again, what was the transfer? I mean, at the time as a player, you just thought you were told that was the right thing and you got on with it. But I always wonder now, looking back, going, what was the transfer? Like, what was the data used for? Did it actually make a difference, or was there a bit of job justification there? I don't know. Whereas there was some certain stuff like with the strength testing, because I was coming back from injury, like it was around my pelvis and my hip. It was like there were certain markers I just knew. Having those tests and being able to test in different ways, specific muscle groups, allowed me to go, right, oh, I'm way off here. I'm way off here. So it's actually, I feel good, but I'm not good. So that testing did influence as an injury prevention. And but nowadays, I mean, goodness me, they've got everything under the sun. And I'm sure in 10 years' time, we'll look back at how crude our measures are just now.
Yeah.
At the minute, it feels very cutting edge, and feels like we're just we seem to know, we have the ability to know everything about an athlete, or as much as we need to know at the minute. So
Yeah, it's really interesting because when you think about, but if I put it into our context in terms of operations leaders and operations teams, ultimately operations teams are all about, driving performance out of the operations team, right? Trying to get as much work done with as, least amount of effort, drive the efficiency and productivity. So your performance on the pitch is our productivity in an organizational perspective, and in the same way. A big worry for organizations is burnout, employee burnout, right? Because if you work people too hard for too long a period of time, then you're going to get burnt out and you get sickness and all the other things that happen as a result of that. And it's pretty common. You see it in organizations when there's been pressure points. There's a lot of synergies then in what you guys are doing, because you're obviously trying to make sure that the players at the optimal condition for when they cross the line, so they haven't been overly overloaded and they're ready to go for that 14 minutes, right, or that 7 minutes and that half. So there's a lot of synergies in terms of what you guys try and do on a pitch, and that's why it's quite interesting to learn about what the things that you look at. So before we jump into that, just let's go into sevens then. So GB sevens. So tell us a little bit about your GB sevens philosophy, right? Because it's fast forward from when you first started in the early noughties, I guess you'd say, and to now. So what's the philosophy for the whole organization of the team now?
yeah, GB Sevens, I suppose philosophy, there's a number of things. There's goals and there's philosophy. I think philosophy, we're there to push the boundaries of performance. So, which aligns to the conversation you're having there. Whether we're doing that or not remains to be seen. But that's our philosophy. That's what we're wanting to do, is push the envelope a little bit, and we do that under. I think you speak to. It's really interesting traveling around the world with different unions that have different constraints across the world. I think the thing I've learned is everybody has a constraint. There's always constraints somewhere, whether it's resource or weather or whatever. There's always a constraint. So it's how do you push the boundaries of your performance within that, whatever your constraint is. So that's ultimately ours, is to optimize what we're doing. And we believe we do that, then we will at some point we will create and sustain the world's best sevens environment. And we believe we're going to do that. What the timeline looks on that, we have that internally in our heads, but and we've got a bit of a roadmap, but actually that's not fixed at all. That's just, we know we're going to get there if we continue to follow this philosophy. So good to kind of circle back to your point, like an example of that. How are we doing that? So one of our constraints is we are camp-based model at the minute. So we've got people living all over Great Britain, and then we've got to come together as a team to play, and then we travel away and we play. And what we do at the minute is we come in as a group, we train for 3 or 4 days, and then we go away for might be 2 weeks, might be a week, might be 4 days, depending on the model and the time we've got available to us. So we plan all this out for a year. And you're right, the point about loading is a huge, and probably the biggest thing that is constantly in our heads, is going, right, okay, we're wanting them to peak here. We know there's no point sitting down here, because you need to actually chronically build them up. It's a simple way. You just have to like build up their load. So I know I couldn't go run a marathon just now because I've not ran enough. But what I need to do is train for that. But then just before that, I don't want to be running 20 miles 3 days before. It's dead simple stuff and I don't understand the science of it. I just understand what we need to do is actually that's how we're trying to do it with rugby. And then in the sevens point of view, we've got all these tournaments in the year, so how do we peak and go, and then how do we improve as well, because they're all individuals. So how do we actually get them to a point where they're not just able, but they're actually thriving in that environment? But we've only got a 3-week window now. What does that look like? So every training session is thought about in that regards. If you think then we're coming at our constraint about a camp-based model, is going, we've got coaches that want to put in rugby and fill the day, and actually we've not seen them. I want to do X, Y, and Z, but actually, is that the right thing? Because chronically, and their chronic loads opens them up to more injury.
Yeah, of course.
How we manage them and the squad, and we're always rugby. You're always running the risk. There's always a risk reward on injury, and how far we push things. But again, it's about us managing that using data. So we have GPS on everything we do. So we track their running loads, not just the meters they do, but their high speed exposures, which is really important to sevens. So we'll make sure at home they've got specific programs that make sure you need to be hitting 90% of your high speed exposure, and that's all individualized to that individual. They've got so many exposures, they've got so much running load before they even come into camp, so that we can train them effectively and train them safely, and likewise before we head off into tournament. So we're using data in that way, wellness scores, daily monitoring, and then the subjective thing of actually checking in with people, I think, is underrated as well, and actually having a relationship with people. And how are you feeling? Where are we at? What are you feeling? As an athlete, it's amazing how you know your body when you're right on that edge. You kind of know when you're creaking, when you're not, or when you're feeling sore. But actually, I'm actually okay. I'm sore, but I'm okay. I'm okay. It's amazing.
And I guess in some ways the data, the amount of data you collect these days on that strength and conditioning side to make sure the player is, as we say, the optimal performance. But it's always fascinating for me about the difference, the data versus the mind, right? Because the mind is probably if not the harder thing to control, right? Because the data, you can use the data to build your conditioning and all those kind of things, and but it's the mental strength piece which is always fascinating. And I suspect data's not really used there. Or do you see, is there any measures of seeing how people react? Is that how that works?
Spot on. A few years ago, I did a dissertation in. I flat listed all the data we had
Hmm.
on a specific six moments in a tournament. So
Right.
there was six moments, and I flat listed all the data I had as the head coach at that time. I was a head coach, and there was millions and millions and millions and millions of data points,
Hmm.
millions of dots I could join. So how do I make a decision about that as a coach? And the whole point about the dissertation was going, and I kind of finished with this analogy on it was, do you know the rabbit duck picture?
Yeah, yeah,
Rabbit.
yeah, yeah, completely. Yeah,
So if you lived in a world where only rabbits existed, what would you see in that picture?
yeah. Of course, you see
Only
a
see
rabbit, right?
rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah. You live in a say you live in a world where only ducks existed. You'd only see ducks. You wouldn't know the rabbit thing existed.
Yeah.
At the minute, like we're dealing with so much data, and then what we do is we join dots. So we only live in a world with rabbits. Oh, there's the rabbit dot. So we join, and oh, that's the solution. That's how we make this better. But actually, we don't know. We're not privy to the rest of it,
Mhm.
or our bias takes us down the rabbit analogy rather
Yeah.
than actually looking objectively at the rabbit duck. And that's a very crude analogy, but hopefully that paints the picture. Is
Yeah,
we've
no.
got the minute. So, for example, we've got in a game we've got. Oh my God, I'll not go through it all, but we've got when that player wakes up in the morning, they're filling out forms, going, "This is how I feel." Wellness scores, muscle scores. They're doing testing, stretch testing. This
Wow.
is everything in the morning, blood pressure, all that kind of jazz. Then in that moment, we've got that data, we've got the analysis of the opposition, we've got the analysis of us, we've got the GPS of us, we've got then the volatile situation of a sevens game, the volatile situation of 14 players on the pitch, and then a volatile situation of a referee who's a human and as we've said, is trying to referee a sport that actually is not easy to referee.
Mm.
It's actually very, very grey. Like I genuinely, you could stop every breakdown and go, there is some sort of infringement there.
Mhm.
If they wanted to, could blow the whistle because
Yeah.
in the law that is. But what they do is they put their own interpretation on it, and so it's such a volatile situation. So yeah, we try and, especially as coaches, we feel like we need this justification of, oh, we need, like, I need something to lean on. Oh, it's the restarts. That's the reason why, and because the data says this. Now, yes, that might be right, and that is pointing us in a direction. But is there other areas that we're even unaware of, that
Yeah.
dots that we haven't joined, that actually are bigger bang for buck? And I think that's the thing, is the bang for buck, and that's my big fascination with data, is it's actually pulling out. I don't think you can do anything wrong in your coaching. It's what is the bang for buck?
Yeah.
Can I be doing this more efficiently? Can I be doing this better?
Yeah.
And I sometimes think we lean on data and we put 100% validity on it. Actually, the validity isn't necessarily that, because we don't know, and we don't know what the validity of this is. And if we know it's not 100% valid, and it might be 50% valid, that's also cool. We can still use that data.
Yeah.
But as long as we know and we have the headspace to go,
Yeah.
right, we think we're in the right direction, but let's be open to the fact that actually there might be something else, and there might be other dots we need to join here. So, yeah, probably not answers, but a
Yeah.
headspace where I've kind of went down a bit of a rabbit hole, excuse the pun, on it.
But it's interesting though, Kieran, because actually when you think about it, um, that is actually very similar to what happens in businesses, right? The amount of data, people aren't shy of data. They've got so much of it, right, from a business perspective. And it's, where do you start, right? How do you use the right data to make the right decisions rather than look at everything? And so you guys are going through that phase where, if you think about all sport, and rugby's one, you think about Formula One, football, all these sports are collecting data like crazy. There's so much stuff, and the split-second decisions that will win or lose a game, or a race, or whatever it happens to be. So it's about even from a business point of view, it's about delving into the data pool you've had. And I love the analogy of the rabbit and the duck because it's what you know, and that brings a couple of questions in my mind. First is where AI will play because that's where the rabbit and duck starts breaking down because the AI can look at across the piece and give you things that you didn't think about, and that's the power of it, right? That's the real excitement of AI. Outside of, I think you still always will need a human interpretation because, as you said, each ref is different. By the way, quick question on the ref: do you collect any data on the ref? Do you kind of say
Yeah,
ref
yeah,
does
yeah,
this ref does
yeah,
that?
yeah. We collect. I mean, they're humans, so they have trends,
Yeah.
and we try and interpret those trends and go and also yeah. But I mean, the good thing with the sevens, it's a bit of a family, and we know the refs, we know them well. They know us, and they know we look at them, and so we know if there's certain referees that are like very hot on the breakdown, or
Yeah.
they'll not like certain things, so we'll just have to dial back a little bit, or we feel we can get away with certain things. So
Oh wow.
yeah, that goes on.
I
And
bet.
it's,
I
it's
bet.
also
I bet. So just this AI question then. So excuse me. So do you think again, sport will be ones that will bring use cases of using AI, the crunching of data, because you guys have regular volumes of data, right? It happens consistently. What's your view on it? What's your view on what potentially AI could do?
I think what you've just said is exactly my personal space, and that is I completely agree with you. I think that's the beauty of what AI could do is look at things objectively and go, here's the dot joining, and actually you've joined A to B, but actually over here there's a lot of other dots that could be joined as well. And then there's a human interpretation of you describe the valid you put the validity on which one and what's bang for buck for you. I think that's where AI could do that, because as a coach, or when you're in it, we all do it. We all do this. I could, whatever I coach, if I say, we want to, every third phase, I want our winger to stand on their head. We could do that, and then I could pull it. I could somehow manipulate a stat to go, oh, see, we're now better because our winger's standing on their head. Now, are we better because the winger's standing on their head, or are we not? Probably not, would be my guess.
Yeah,
But what we want is the ability for AI to actually present all these things and go, this is your data. These are the trends, and if there was some sort of percentage validity on that, that would be incredible. I think that's the thing there, because we have so much. And the thing about, say, sevens in sport is it's so fast paced. So sevens, for example, sometimes we've got 2 hours in between games. So actually knowing what bang for buck is the biggest thing,
yeah,
because yes, we've got a brilliant analyst, Will Price, who can turn stuff about. We've got excellent S&C team. We've got we've got everything we want at our fingertips, but can we use it? Because we've got to look at it, interpret it, and then also put it into a format where players have just been through a 30-mile-an-hour car crash, and then they've got to recover, go through other processes, and then we've got to give them information that they can interpret as a group again. It's a one size fits nobody in terms of the message, but how do we do that, and what is the bang for buck? At the minute, there's a definite thing. Say my personal view in coaching was, I just was like, what's the main thing? So again, it's the bang for buck and the data and the feel and everything. What's the main thing?
yeah.
So how can we pull out the main thing? And I think there's something there. There's space with artificial intelligence that can help us with that. I've no doubt. I think there's an area that's a bit grey over here that we've just kind of scratched the surface. But
Mm.
this is where we've got the tools in place. We need something to pull it together to go, there's the bang for buck. There's the main thing. Um, and I think that's where it could do that. Even if it was just a flat list, we're giving it a flat list of data, and it starts churning something out. Because as I said, we're doing that at the minute. We've got the flat list. We just need to.
Completely, completely. And have you got kind of plans to start adopting some AI in different areas in sevens at the moment, or is it still early days for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff like I spoke like we're from a rugby point of view, from just a rugby point of view, we're using a package called Huddle, and then in that you can like go into export that into a package called Studio. And there's a bit of AI in there in terms of you can, it's like, almost like the Sky Sports thing. And this isn't the level. There's far more levels we could go into, but you can like highlight players and it can just mark them and follow them, and it can
Yeah.
highlight areas on a pitch and a bit Sky Sports style
Yeah.
stuff. And that's a massive learning tool. It's not it's not interpreting the data for us. Like I'm giving it the data, but it's I'm going like just track that player
Yeah.
or just show me the speed that player's running at.
Yeah.
Like that's really impressive, and that's sometimes really good for us because we can go, or what's the distance they're covering, what's the distance of passing they're doing there. Because I've sometimes pulled out a trend where a team from the base of a ruck to the first receiver, actually this pass is miles, and actually they're really close to the D line, but nobody's putting pressure on it. Actually, there's an opportunity there, and I've pulled that out through the AI of Studio. So it's creeping in there,
Yeah.
and every year it gets more refined. And as often with technology, it just gets better and better. And
Really.
it's user friendly for people that, because you're dealing with people that aren't necessarily tech gurus, but I do think it's now part of our world where we need to upskill as coaches, and
Hmm.
it's
So,
part of our world. Yeah.
so do you see, Kieran, as a coach, do you see a day where you walk off the pitch and the AI tells you some specifics for each player that's played that match instantly and says, okay, these are the things that you need to coach that individual player to do for the next match? Or this is the one thing you should say, or this, by the way, this player is probably close to his edge and shouldn't be in the next match. Or do you see a day? Because right now that's instinct. I would imagine that's as a coach's instinct. You know the players well. You've worked with them for many, many months, years. You've got some data points. You understand what the psyche of those individuals are. So when they walk off a pitch, or when you see them play on the pitch, you instinctively probably know what's going on to that individual player. But at some point, I would imagine it's not, inconceivable that you walk off the pitch and it tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely it will, because we we do that manually, almost retrospectively now. So we'll, because as I said, the turnaround time, say seven, let's just speak sevens in particular
Yeah,
specifically. 2 hours in between games. There's a lot, like there could be somebody's picked up an injury. Are they right? Are they wrong? That's probably the biggest bang for buck. Are they going to? Is that person going to be in there? Because if they're not, we don't have a kicker in the team. All that kind of jazz. Rather than finding out the little 2% that we need to go work on as a
but
team. So
yeah,
there's always the dynamics of team sport. But at the minute we do that retrospectively. So we'll go, player X had X amount of minutes, X amount of running meters, high speed exposures. Back in the day when I was an analyst, I used to do like an impact score, like a really crude sort of like, this is a number of impacts this person's had on their body. Therefore, we changed their recovery protocols
mhm,
because of it. Whereas compared to this person, at the minute, because everything's GPS, we actually get an impact score from their GPS. So when their momentum gets hit, so it's basically their deceleration on a hit can track the impact that
yeah,
person's had, and then it's actually a true measure of how hard they've been hit. So again,
nuts, isn't it?
it's crazy, and we can adapt recovery down to that. But then there's a lot as well. Like circle it right back. There's all this, and you made the point about there's some players. Honestly, I don't know how they do it. They just go through it, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm
Fine.
grand. Yeah, this is this is it." And then there's some players are like literally in tears after the game because they're just so sore, so battered. It was so tough. You got to pick them up for the 2 hours. This is the beauty of sport. It's a one size fits nobody. But to answer your point, yes, that's almost where it needs to go, because we're doing it retrospectively and we are using it. But actually, if it's more in the moment, the quicker that turns round, the
Yeah,
more impactful it is. Because if we could walk off the pitch and we go, right, player X, you need to be in ice baths, you need to be on massage, you need to be actually, you're good. Can you go pick up the laptops and start looking at this?
Yeah.
And actually, you're good to go. Just make sure you fuel. That sort of stuff would be incredible. Or the coaching point, the rugby point is the data we receive in the rugby is, I think you've always got to put we're not nowhere near at the stage of putting our coat, hanging people out to dry on stats. I don't think. And when I see coaches doing it, it's a massive bugbear of mine. So I was probably as a coach, had the biggest grounding in stats and my background, and I probably presented them the least. I probably looked at them the most, but presented them the least, because I just seen so many times. A really simple example: player X, you've only made 60% of your tackles. That's not good enough. I'm going to drop you for the next game.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that going, yeah, but that player put themselves in the position to go make those tackles. Like,
Yes.
let's go have a look at those. Let's go have a look at the 60% they made and the 40 they didn't.
Yeah.
Actually, wow, fantastic. Let's
Yeah.
go. I'm concerned about the 100% because this guy's not doing anything. He's so in his comfort zone back here. And actually, as a team, do we need that? No, I don't need that. I want you to go miss some tackles.
Yeah.
So there's not a black and white on what's a good and bad stat, but what it allows you to do is point in the direction. So say, for example, that 60% tackle completion. At the minute, it allows you to go, right, I need to go have a look at that. So that's what the stat does. It just puts a little spotlight on something to go, right, is there something I need to intervene in this? Yes or no? And that's what the stat allows you to do. And that's what I think where we're at. Will it completely inform our coaching? I think it guides you, and I think it certainly helps. But I think you're right. There's always this human element because it's such a volatile.
It is.
Humans and just so much going on. But yeah.
And do you know? I think that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of sport, right? It is that it is. You can never predict it. I mean, who would have thought Man City would go through a period of losing so many games? Just wouldn't have seen it, would you? It just wouldn't have happened. Nobody would have bet that at all. And it's just the beauty of it, right? You just don't know what's going to happen on the day. So, but I guess as any sportsman, you are always looking for the edge, as much of an edge you can get to beat the opposition. But also safety. I think these days, player safety is, significantly more perhaps to even when you were playing, but even before that. And the whole concussion stuff. When you've been hit. I think the gum shields, don't they give you data as well? So all of a sudden the player safety is getting more and more important, and data again plays a big part in that, right?
Yeah, it is, and quite rightly, I don't think you're not going to find anyone that disagrees with the way the sport's moving as well, in terms of it's becoming safer and safer. I mean, as I think back to, again, when I played, and again, you didn't know, no one knew, and it's probably good. Ignorance was bliss, but I mean, goodness me, there was, I wouldn't have played half the games with some of the stuff that went on. Whereas now, there's, as you said, so it's been in the circling in the background for a while, but they used to have like tests on the back of their ears. You could put little patches that would again measure impact for concussion. Now it's gum shields, and they're becoming mandatory.
Yeah,
which is great. We're going through a trialing phase of this because of the data, and again, it's the technology. But we need to support this, and we need to push the trial and be 100% supportive, because there is, quite rightly, when you get more data, you also learn the dangers, and actually, I'm a father of three, do I want to throw my kids into a sport that, in the press at the minute, shows negative connotations of health? If I didn't know the sport, I'd be going, oh my god, that, like, I'd have a red
I'm not
flag.
going to do this. Yeah, totally.
Luckily, I know the sport, and I know, I understand the dangers, but I understand it's that, but I understand the benefits of that.
Yeah.
And that's, yes, I am biased on that, and it's like that with sport, because all the other holistic benefits of sport and the health benefits of sport. But quite rightly, that let's not just accept that. How can we minimize that? And let's work hard at that. So that's a big thing, and especially with rugby in particular, under the spotlight as it stands. But I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, because if it's something we can, as a global entity, get on top of and make this even safer and continue to have the benefits of what it's got, then happy days.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. So, as we wrap up the podcast, I'm just curious if you're kind of going to give advice to people using data. What would you say? What would you say from your perspective in your sporting context? What would your advice be?
Is data, take in as much data as you can. Like at the minute, this is what I do. I try and take in as much as I can. I always try and have that thought in my head is, how valid is this?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is 100% valid and nothing is. And I don't know if valid is the right words, but I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but nothing is 100% valid. Nothing's of zero use at all. But like, no, not every bit of data is 100% valid. And then also have an open mind about going, there's probably something I'm missing here. There's probably something else that I've just not, the dots, the rabbit and duck analogy just sits with me. It's like, am I living in a world of rabbits here? Or is there ducks over here that I need to have a look at? So using that, and I think what's the scariest thing in sport is it is so volatile. There's so much you can do. There's only X amount of time you've got, and there's only so much energy you can put into certain things. So some guidance through data about where you put your energy and how effective you are is massive, and it buys people in as well. So like our recovery protocols, all our S&C stuff is grounded on data.
Yeah.
People buy into it now, and people do it, and then we actually see objective growth and benefits. That's because of data.
Mm.
From a rugby point of view, that's a bit more widespread at the minute. So it's just having that